It has obviously been a crazy week preparing for Week 17 fantasy football, but I knew I had to get this video out to you guys. It is Saturday before Week 17. We've got a game tonight, but that doesn't mean the running back rankings can't be released. So today I am going through the top 30 running back rankings for Week 17 fantasy football. And I'm trying to do everything I possibly can to get you guys to win your fantasy championship this year. So please go down there, drop a like on the video, and subscribe to the channel to show your support. Let's go ahead and dive right into this. So Christian McCaffrey still at number 1. And not only is it always this is the case, because it's Christian McCaffrey, and the numbers on the screen speak for themselves, but he's going to Washington to take on the Commanders. This is a defense that has literally consistently gotten worse without Chase Young and Montez Sweat there anymore. That front seven is not good. That secondary was never good. They just looked a little bit better when they had Chase Young and Montez Sweat getting after the passer. Well, they don't have that anymore. And they're not going to stop Christian McCaffrey in this game. Number 2, Kyren Williams is pretty much firmly planted right now, number 2. He's taking on the Giants in New York, and I think that Kyren Williams, what it comes down to with him, is that he's just so important on this offense at this point. You could argue to me that he is the Rams' number 1 weapon. Not Puka Nacua, not Cooper Kupp. We could have a legitimate conversation that Kyren Williams is their best offensive weapon at this point. I mean, his fantasy numbers speak for themselves. 19 fantasy points per game, 18, almost 19 carries per game, and 4 targets per game. Kyren Williams has had an absolutely amazing season, and it doesn't stop this week against the Giants. Jahmyr Gibbs and Raheem Mostert at number 3 and 4. Gibbs taking on Dallas tonight in Dallas, and Mostert going to Baltimore to take on the Ravens. So Jahmyr Gibbs, for weeks I've been saying the same thing on him, which is that Jahmyr Gibbs, you just can't bench him. You cannot bench Jahmyr Gibbs. Now, he, admittedly so on my personal rankings, he's a guy that can flip from 17 to 1 week to all the way to here to 3 another week. I feel pretty confident telling my audience that Jahmyr Gibbs belongs inside the top 3 right now. It's not a great matchup by any stretch of the imagination. I'm not saying that it is. But Dallas has been beaten by running backs this year. It's not impossible to do well, and Jahmyr Gibbs is so greatly used in this offense, running behind a top 3 offensive line. Raheem Mostert is injured going into the game, questionable. That's the big concern I have. But Raheem Mostert, as far as usage goes, locked and loaded inside the top 5. Every single week. I don't care what the matchup is. Because you can see on the screen, those numbers, volume-wise, they're not exactly some ridiculous number. But the guy has found the end zone 21 times this year. And that's because Miami knows how to get him in the end zone and get him in an opportunistic matchup versus a linebacker a lot of the time if they throw him the ball. Or whatever their run scheme is. Raheem Mostert easily locked inside the top 5. Comfortable at number 4, even though it is a tough matchup. Travis Etienne, back here inside the top 5. And I gotta say, the only reason why is because he's playing the Panthers. Have I watched him at all in the past month and thought to myself, okay, looks like he could have a rebound week? Unfortunately, no. I gotta be honest. And if you go back to like week 8 or week 7 running back rankings on my channel, you'll see how different his numbers are. He was averaging like 22 touches per game at one point, 23. Well, those numbers have gone down. And I've been saying this for weeks. I think it's because he's hurt. I don't think he's fully healthy. But I was saying this on my Friday night live stream. Literally the only exception to the Carolina Panthers running back rule was Bijan Robinson. Aside from Bijan Robinson, every other running back has crushed the Panthers. Aaron Jones just did it last week. So Travis Etienne, yes, I do believe is a very good play this week. David Montgomery and Rachaad White at 6 and 7. Montgomery taking on the Cowboys tonight, and Rachaad White taking on the Saints. So David Montgomery, for a while I was ranking him over Jahmyr Gibbs, and I felt really good about it. But David Montgomery, there's 2 things that I am concerned with. Number 1 with Montgomery is that he does look like to maybe have slowed down just a little bit. Maybe just a little bit. I don't know if it's scheme related or coach related. I don't know what it is. It does look like he's just not getting in the end zone as frequently, and he's just not dominating a game as much as he would at the beginning of the year. And he's had his own injuries as well. And number two, obviously the matchup isn't great, but the workload is consistent. And the good thing with Montgomery, it applies to Jahmyr Gibbs as well. He runs behind a top 3 offensive line in the league. And then Rachaad White, I mean, just continues to astound me in fantasy. With his efficiency numbers, you don't see many running backs doing this with this kind of efficiency. Rachaad White has been really good, though. I mean, Rachaad White is a top-tier player in fantasy right now. And this week, taking on the Saints, that matchup just doesn't scare me. It just doesn't. The Saints' defense is failing. And Rachaad White and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they're actually coming into this game with momentum that they're looking to carry into the playoffs. So Rachaad White absolutely has to be inside the top 10. Comfortably here at number 7. James Cook and Saquon Barkley at 8 and 9. James Cook holds ground inside the top 10 versus New England this week, and Saquon taking on the Rams. So James Cook, obviously a couple weeks ago, had the massive game, 35-plus point game, right? And it was crazy. It helped advance people to the playoffs, and it helped me in a best ball league. But here's the thing about what happened last week. He came back down to earth. It was another relatively pedestrian performance from James Cook. Well, here's the reason why I'm not moving him. James Cook, what I liked about it weeks ago in my last buy low trade target video when I said to trade for him, and I said that he could be a league winner in the playoffs, the reason why is because after they fired Ken Dorsey in Buffalo, James Cook had 2 straight games leading up to that video where he had 20-plus opportunities. He continues to carry the ball a bunch, way more than he did under Ken Dorsey. He had 20 carries again last week. So he did not just lose importance in this offense like he was. It was just not a great week. James Cook against the Patriots, the only thing that concerns me is that with Stephon Diggs being almost irrelevant in the past month or two, what if New England thinks of Rachaad White as their primary weapon they have to stop? It's possible. I wouldn't say it's necessarily likely, but it's possible. But James Cook stays inside the top 10. And Saquon to me versus the Rams it's a good matchup. I mean, the Rams defense is just not very good. And I've been saying this all year. And Saquon Barkley, it's very consistent how I feel about him. Boom or bust player because the offense depends on him. That's the reason why he's so boom or bust. If he was on a more balanced offense, I'd feel way more comfortable having Saquon ranked near the top 5. I don't feel that way because the offense depends on Saquon Barkley. That's my ultimate problem with him. But against the Rams, I'm going to take the shot because he did it last week against the Eagles. Had a great game. I think he could do it again. Bijan Robinson. And I've got Breece Hall locked in at 11 because I did these rankings before the Thursday night game. So Breece Hall is locked in at 11. Number 10, though, Bijan Robinson against Chicago. This is not a good opportunity for him. I don't like the opportunity. And Bijan Robinson the last several weeks, even with a relatively healthy workload, has just not been very good. Bijan Robinson, I have concerns with against the Chicago Bears this week. Now, when I'm looking at him over a guy like James Conner at 12 against Philadelphia, Bijan I still do believe has a relatively high ceiling compared to James Conner. I think they're close to each other, but I think that Bijan's ceiling is a couple points higher. That's the reason that I've got him at 10. And James Conner at 12 against the Philadelphia Eagles in Philly. I mean, this is just an opportunistic matchup. And James Conner, I said this in my What I Got Right and What I Got Wrong live stream a couple days ago. James Conner is the guy I can't figure out. And this is just me being completely transparent with you guys because transparency is important to me. And I know it's important to the audience and the community in fantasy football. Because what are we going to do if we're just going to go around lying about our takes? James Conner, I have never gotten him right for years. Since literally the birth of this channel back to 2020, I've been doubting James Conner and he always proves me wrong. I rank him high and he doesn't perform. I rank him low and he outperforms me. That's what's happening with James Conner as of late. So against a great matchup against the Philadelphia Eagles, the way he's playing on top of it, James Conner inside the top 12. Derrick Henry and Kenneth Walker at 13 and 14. Henry going to Houston and Kenneth Walker taking on the Steelers. So Derrick Henry, I remember several weeks ago I called for the Derrick Henry big game against the Houston Texans. And not only did it not happen, it was a complete embarrassment for him and me. We were both locked in it together, intertwined, because I called for it. It didn't happen. And part of me wonders if Houston just sold out to stop him because they knew. Obviously, they knew they couldn't let him beat them. But part of me wonders also, what is the likelihood of it happening again? And that's why I've got Derrick Henry relatively highly ranked, because they're going to have to use him. And then Kenneth Walker, the reason I prefer him over Kenneth Walker is because Kenneth Walker is coming into the game as a game time call. So unless you've got an option also at 3 o'clock or on Sunday night, right? You can't play Kenneth Walker unless we hear some news today or tomorrow on Sunday. So Kenneth Walker against the Steelers, I actually like the matchup. I actually think they'll do well against the Steelers. And Kenneth Walker, the way he's been playing since he's been back, has been really good. So Kenneth Walker, if he plays, I'll take him at 14. Above, Alvin Kamara at 15 and Zamir White at 16. Yes, Alvin Kamara going to Tampa and Zamir White going to Indianapolis. Alvin Kamara, same issue as Kenneth Walker. Also coming in questionable. He's got an illness. What I'm reading is that he probably plays. But who knows? I mean, I've been saying this for a while on the New Orleans Saints. This is a team that really worries me. They've got lots of things going wrong with them. There's a lot of finger pointing. There's a lot of dysfunction on this. They just don't look well oiled when I watch them play. Alvin Kamara has held his fantasy value, though, much like Chris Olave, because he's getting all of the volume out of the backfield. And he still has big play capability. And Tampa's defense is not some stalwart defense. I think Alvin Kamara could take advantage of the matchup. He just has to play. And Zamir White, one spot over Jonathan Taylor at 17. And they're playing each other. So I had a question about this on Patreon that was asking me, what's the reasoning for Zamir White, one spot over Jonathan Taylor? Because I've got both, and I'm trying to decide who to play. So here's my reasoning. Zamir White, since Josh Jacobs has been out, is handling the Josh Jacobs workload, meaning 20 plus, 25 plus opportunities. He gets everything. They don't do the whole committee running back. They don't do that in Las Vegas. Whoever the running back one is the running back one. And Zamir White last week tore up the Chiefs on like 23 plus carries. Over 130 yards. Like, Zamir White has actually looked explosive when he has played. Now, we need him to find the end zone against Indianapolis because this is actually arguably a tougher matchup than the matchup he had Kansas City. But the reason I like him over Jonathan Taylor is because Jonathan Taylor, yes, he did come back last week and he had an okay fantasy performance. Look at that performance closely, though. He had an early touchdown in that game and was basically silent the rest of the time. He averaged like less than 3 yards per carry. And this was my problem with Jonathan Taylor back when he got injured. I said, what are the chances he comes back week 16 and just picks up where he left off? Because he was doing so well. I said, I don't think they're that high. And that's my ultimate problem with Jonathan Taylor. And it came true. It came to fruition exactly how I thought it would. So Jonathan Taylor, yes, handling, all the work, especially with Zach Moss out. I prefer Zamir White, though, because I know he's getting the work, and he's actually on a really good hot streak right now. I'll take Zamir White, one spot of JT, but I think they're both good plays. Devon Achane lands at 18, and Joe Mixon at 19. Achane going to Baltimore, and Mixon going to Kansas City. Achane has to remain inside the top 30. He obviously had to fall, though. I was ranking him inside the top 10. And it just hasn't been there. And the real problem really is, because if you look at his numbers on the screen right now, Devon Achane, his workload has really been very similar all year. There really hasn't been like a game where, there really hasn't been too many games where he's gone like 20 to 25 plus opportunities. Achane's workload is relatively low week to week, and that's the ultimate problem with it, is that if he doesn't hit the big play, then he's not really doing much for you. The good thing is his floor is relatively high. That's why I like Achane still, and he's very capable of having that big play happen. Against Baltimore with a possibly limited or out Raheem Mostert, I still do like Achane over Joe Mixon at 19. And Joe Mixon, I think that Joe Mixon's still a good play. I think he's a very good play. And honestly, he may very well move up this list throughout the day leading up to tomorrow. So if you want an updated ranking, join the Patreon today. Help support the channel and get updated rankings leading up to game time. Joe Mixon to me is a guy that easily could move up, because Joe Mixon, I do think, has a decent opportunity to do well when Zamir White did well last week against the Chiefs. Joe Mixon, still a decent play. 20 and 21, Isaiah Pacheco and DeAndre Swift. Pacheco taking on the Bengals and Swift taking on the Cardinals. So Pacheco obviously depends on if he plays. Like, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about this one. And I think that Pacheco would have been a decent play had he played all of last week. Now he comes into the week questionable with a concussion and with a shoulder injury. So this dude's banged up, as he was at the end of last year. But if he plays, I still think he's a decent top 25 option because of the fact that this offense does use him. When he is there, Pacheco is important to this offense. I think there's an argument they need this guy. I mean, they've lost a lot of offensive momentum without Isaiah Pacheco over the past month. So I actually think there's a strong argument to be made that Pacheco, if he plays, could have a very good game in this week. And Swift has looked better over the past 2 weeks, but I'm still not confident. Against the Cardinals, it is a good matchup, but I have very little confidence right now in Swift. And it still remains, because I still easily could see him getting taken out of the game. The good thing that he has on his side is that whenever Philadelphia is close or leading in a game, Swift is usually used more. But if they're trailing and they're in a tight game against a competitive opponent, that's when they have tended to shift away from the run. So that's Swift's problem. And that's why I can't trust him, but I still think he's a relatively decent option. Ty Chandler and Tony Pollard, 22 and 23. Ty Chandler taking on Green Bay and Pollard taking on Detroit tonight. So Ty Chandler, one spot above Tony Pollard for me this week. It simply has to do with matchup. It's 100% matchup. If Tony Pollard was playing the Panthers or Tony Pollard was playing the Giants, Tony Pollard would be closer to 15 than he would be to 20 probably. This is a matchup thing. And Tony Pollard, the problem that I have with him consistently is this guy is not a big play threat like he was last year. That's just not the case. We haven't seen that much from him this year. So against a tough run defense versus Detroit tonight, he has to be lower than a guy like Ty Chandler. And listen, I've got my own issues with Ty Chandler. I wouldn't say they're drastically different from Tony Pollard, though. Tony Pollard sometimes gets less volume than I think he should. And Ty Chandler, the problem with him is that he's on the Vikings, and they don't use their running backs consistently enough. Similar to the Eagles a little bit. Ty Chandler against the Green Bay Packers, though, I want that matchup. I think it's a great matchup to have. So Ty Chandler, just based on matchup, is going to be above Tony Pollard. Chuba Hubbard and Zeke Elliott at 24 and 25. Chuba Hubbard going to Jacksonville and Zeke going to Buffalo. So Chuba Hubbard, I mean, the reality with Chuba right now is that he's just playing so well on a bad team. It's similar to Saquon Barkley and James Conner and Breece Hall. Like, those guys are kind of all relatively the same. Chuba Hubbard, I don't trust quite as much as those other guys to fulfill a ceiling on a week-to-week basis, which is why he finds himself lower in my rankings. But there's no question, he gets the workload, and he has big play capability. This guy is a legit player in this league right now. So Chuba Hubbard has been a lone bright spot. Against the Jags, I actually like the matchup. I could see myself playing him over a lot of guys. That's why I've got him over Zeke. And Zeke, let me be clear on this, doesn't have a problem with workload either. There's no problem with workload. In fact, if he wasn't getting targeted last week, he would have had a bad fantasy performance. That's my ultimate problem with him. We can discuss, and the only reason I bring this up again is because I've gotten comments about this one. We can have a conversation whether or not we think Zeke is still an explosive player. I don't think he is. I've watched him. I don't see much burst from him. Let me know in the comments what you think. But what we can't argue on is he is not efficient with the ball in his hands, getting the carry. He is just not. Look at the numbers on the screen. They support what I'm trying to tell you on Zeke. And against a bad matchup versus Buffalo this week, that's why I'll take a guy like Chuba Hubbard over Zeke. But I don't think Zeke's a bad play. Gus Edwards and Aaron Jones at 26 and 27. The Gus bus taking on Miami and Aaron Jones taking on the Minnesota Vikings in Minnesota. So Gus Edwards, I think really the ultimate thing I can establish with Gus is he's a very, actually, I think, safe option. And I don't think he's anything more than that. And let me explain what I mean. So Gus Edwards essentially is going to be locked in for about 12 to 16 carries moving forward. They've got no more J.K. Dobbins, obviously, that's history. And they've also got no more Keaton Mitchell taking touches away from Gus, which he was. They've got none of that. Gus Edwards is their guy at this point, forced upon them. He's not that good, so he's not going to get you a 100-plus yard performance. The only thing with an outside chance that he has more fantasy value than this ranking is if he gets a 2 to 3 touchdown game, which he has done. That's why I'm leaving the door open for it. But this week against the Dolphins, with how low his ceiling is, I think most of the time, he's basically locked into like a 10 to 14 point window. That's just the way I think about Gus. So Gus, I think he's good. A decent option on a great running team. He'll be fine. And then Aaron Jones against Minnesota shocked me last week to a point, but then I remembered he was taking on the Panthers. I was considering moving him up a lot higher. I ended up not moving him up too much higher, but I do think that Aaron Jones this week is not going to have the same success. Against the Brian Flores-led defense that has done pretty well this year, I don't see the same level of success for Aaron Jones, and I just simply can't trust the guy because he's not fully healthy, and his offense at times has completely phased him out of a game plan. Austin Eckler, Javonte Williams, and Jerome Ford locked in at 30. Jerome Ford was locked in at 30. Again, these rankings came out before the week. If you want to see rankings before they come out, join the Patreon today. You can see ranking changes, and you can see rankings before the video comes out. You get advanced access to rankings. And the thing about Eckler, it remains the same. And Eckler actually outperformed my expectations for him last week. I still move him down this week against the Broncos because last time they played Denver, they couldn't establish any offense. This offense just stinks. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about this one. No other way around it. They just stink. It's the fact. Eckler's a decent play just based on target opportunity, but Eckler I don't trust at all. And Javonte, I don't trust him either. Javonte has been so blah this year. Against the Chargers, it's like Javonte Williams looks to me like what we used to see a lot with ACL injuries. That year after they come back, it's not a great year. And that's what we're seeing with Javonte this year. It's been the same story all year. Not explosive, not efficient, not getting in the end zone. That's my problem with him. But workload, is relatively consistent. So let me know what you think of the rankings in the comments below and what questions you need answered for Week 17 fantasy football. And if you want to see the top 30 wide receiver rankings for Week 17 fantasy football, click on this video right here.